And so most people try to portray it as such. What we are finding with the Russians, and it was an overreaction, but what we are finding with the Russians is an increasing belligerence. And the only thing I can equate that to is if in the old days the USSR, Canada and Mexico wanted to join the USSR, we would become pretty defensive about it. I am one who has changed my position with respect to inviting Georgia and Ukraine into NATO right now. I think we need to give it a little time, let it cook in the oven. It's not ready to take out. Let Russia get used to the idea that the Baltic states are now part of NATO, that most of the old Warsaw Pact states are either in NATO or in the MAP, in the Membership Action Plan to join NATO, and they have to do some adjusting. And so I would go slower on Georgia and Ukraine. And the German Chancellor Merkel is under some pressure because of Germany's, as you know, dependence on Russian energy. And she tempers her remarks, but it's a matter of concern for them.
Yes, enjoyed your remarks, and these are perilous times. Question, though, is 700 billion figure has been mentioned, but then also a figure of 800 billion has been mentioned. What about the alternative minimum tax? Does that in any way come into play here?
The alternative minimum tax was taken care of in the $850 billion. Let me, for another year, call the patch, AMT patch. The $700 billion is an authorization. 250 is available immediately. Another, I think, 100, and then the last 350 they have to come back to Congress. But there will be something, hopefully, of value when they buy these mortgage-backed securities that are either underwater, or they call them toxic instruments and so on. One will have something to value, and it's hoped that as the market recovers and as the housing stocks recover, then the government can sell them for what they paid or maybe even a profit. And so although the $700 billion figure is mentioned, it will never cost, in my view, $700 billion. In fact, if it's done properly, the government can actually make a little money on the deal, because the government can hold these instruments pending the recovery of the housing market, whereas some of the private institutions don't have that luxury. The 850 was the tax extenders package that was added on in the Senate after the bill, the so-called bailout bill. I think it'd be better known as a workout bill, because I think that's what everyone has in mind. But it was added on in the Senate. Some of that was paid for with other tax extenders. Talking about paid for, we are trying as desperately as we know how to inject what's known as PAYGO back into the budgetary process in Washington. PAYGO is something we simply do with our own business and lives every day, and that is, if you want to spend money, you've got to find a way to get it up or cut the budget in a lesser priority somewhere to make it up, so that you don't keep digging yourself into debt. We've had some limited success with that. It's a tool, it's not an end in and of itself. But as I said earlier, we are on an unsustainable financial course, and we've got to change the direction of our ship. It takes 7 miles, somewhere between 5 and 7 miles. Jim Gillen may know this better than I do, since we're all Navy buddies. Somewhere between 5 and 7 miles to turn an aircraft carrier 90 degrees. The same thing is going to be true with our budgetary deficit. We can't turn too quickly without throwing the country into a deep, deep recession. But we've got to start the trend line so that we can begin to exercise some degree of fiscal responsibility, not only to ourselves, but to those who come after us.
Yeah, Representative Tanner, Before I came over today, I looked at the Real Clear Politics polls that show Senator Obama 6 to 8 points ahead in the presidential race. The question I have for you is, someone who's had a long history in Tennessee, do you think there's anything to the so-called Bradley effect where white voters, when they get into the polls in Tennessee or elsewhere, will say, yeah, I'd like to vote for the Democrat, but I'm really not going to vote for Senator Obama because he's black?
We were talking about that, David, Todd and I were at lunch. It was true in Virginia when Douglas Wilder was elected governor. It was true out the Bradley effect out in L.A. and California, as you know. This is 2008. As circumstances develop and change, one would hope that people would be judged more based on their abilities or ideas than anything else, and that may be. I'm sure we're not there yet, and I don't think there's any way to quantify the answer to your question until November. Let me say one other thing about this financial situation. Pete Peterson, who's the Treasury Secretary under President Nixon and Ford, has started a foundation. He hired David Walker, who is the former GAO head, General Accounting Office head, to do it. He's putting $1 billion of his own money into this foundation to try to educate the American people on the perilous future of our financial situation if we don't do something and do it quickly. They have a film called IOUSA that is their first attempt at mass communication to the majority of our citizens about the dangers of the policies that we collectively are pursuing as American citizens. And so I hope you would give some future to that. The other thing I'd like to say is, as we see net savers around the world, particularly China, to some degree, and lesser degree Japan, and the oil-producing countries in the Middle East, they have come up with what they call sovereign funds. Sovereign funds are trillions of dollars that are controlled by governments rather than private enterprises that are engaged in profit. What scares me about our dependence upon foreign capital is these, I can follow money, I can read a balance sheet, and I know what people are doing with money, with the risk reward for profit and so on. With sovereign funds, there is no transparency, and people may be using those for a geopolitical purpose that has nothing whatsoever to do with profit, which makes our country even more vulnerable to manipulation. So I hope you'll give some thought to that. It's not fun, as I said, y'all were having way too much fun before I got up here. But it's something that we, as our citizenship demands, that we pay